security of different pieces of software. So that's how you do it. That's one way to reduce the information asymmetry for software vulnerabilities. But a lot of the problems that are going on the internet right now aren't necessarily down to just software vulnerabilities. You've got, spam, phishing, malware, all of this stuff. That's what the user's biggest problem is. Incentives matter here as well. So one example is that users don't necessarily know when they're dealing with a good website or a bad website. Everyone's got a website. It may have an SSL cert, so that means it's secure. What's the solution to this? Well, there are a number of third-party certification authorities which will issue you a certificate if you pass certain requirements. And you can proudly put the certificate on your website, and consumers can look at this and say, yes, I think this site is trustworthy or not. One example is, the biggest example is the Trusty certification scheme. Now, Trusty, as you probably know, it has very low requirements. The only thing it requires is that you have a privacy policy and that you publish it on your website. So this has nothing to do with the security of the website or whether or not its intentions are genuine or not. But they're setting the bar very low because they're trying to make money off of certifications. And there's been some research which has shown that these signaling devices using the Trusty certification is actually worse than ineffective. Bad companies are more likely to be certified than good companies with using Trusty. So he used data from SiteAdvisor, which tries to determine whether a site's issuing malware. And he found that 5.5% of all Trusty certified sites were classified as bad, compared to just 2.5% of all sites that are found on the web. So if you come across something with a Trusty seal, you should definitely not take anything of use from it, okay? But it makes perfect sense, because if you've got a scam going, the first thing you want to do is you want to instill trust into the consumer. And so if you can buy it for a fairly cheap price, then why not do it? He also probably more controversially looked at search results on Google and compared the first 10 hits to the first 10 paid advertisements that come along the side. And he did it for certain keywords like screensaver, where you have notorious adware and malware that's often attached. And he found that the sites which had paid advertising were far more likely to be malicious than the sites which appeared naturally in the organic search results. And I think this is a problem. This is a problem for Google, and it's a problem for society, because what's happening is advertisers are are paying money to exploit users, and Google is profiting from it. So what are some of the solutions? You could require certification authorities to devote more resources to policing content. You could more controversially assign liability to the certification authorities. You could make Trusty liable if they grant the certification without proper vetting. Another thing you could do is you could require that the complaints against companies are also published. So right now, if someone has a Trusty seal, you click on it and it takes you to the Trusty website and says, yes, this is a Trusty certified site. But it only says good things about them there. But if you also require that complaints and ratings get disseminated as well, that could have a positive effect. So now with my remaining time, I'm going to turn to some work that I've been doing looking at phishing attacks recently. So the first question is, I guess, how is phishing an economic problem? Why is it not just a technical problem? One is that you have these attackers who are carrying out the phishing attacks, and then you have a range of different entities which are responsible for defending against the attacks. You have banks, ISPs, which are hosting malicious sites, domain registrars, and each of these defenders are acting in their own strategic interest. And by acting in their own strategic interest, you sometimes can end up with suboptimal outcomes. Likewise, you have the effort that a defender, that these banks take, also suffers from informational asymmetries. Do you know how good your particular bank is in removing phishing sites as they appear? Do you know how good your ISP is at removing phishing sites and responding to requests to remove phishing sites? The information is not out there, and because of that, you end up getting a free riding effect. And finally, the most obvious reason why phishing is economic is that the losses have financial consequences, direct financial consequences. So our contribution is to first describe how one particular gang of phishing attackers, the Rockfish gang, have acted in a very coordinated manner and to exploit the lack of coordination between the defenders. We've empirically measured the response times according to the type of phishing attack, the bank that's been impersonated, and where the hosting site is located. And finally, we come up with a first attempt at estimating the financial loss that's imposed due to phishing based purely on our empirical observations. So, very quickly, just let me describe the technical requirements for a phishing attack. Attackers send out spam impersonating banks with a link to the fake website. From the hosted fake site can be done in a couple of ways. It can be hosted on free web space. This is fairly common. It can be the most common way is for it to be instead located on a compromised machine somewhere, URL looking like that. And the third approach is just to register a domain that sort of looks like a bank name and then point it back to either one of these free web space or compromised machines. So that's the hosting side of it. And then, so once someone has given away their details to a phishing site, it has to be recovered by the attacker somehow. And this is done in two ways. First, it can be done by where the completed forms are automatically sent off to an email, to a email drop account, usually a Gmail or Yahoo webmail account. Alternatively, they could be stored in a text file on the spoof website itself, and they go back and retrieve them. So there are different ways to approach phishing. And a lot of the academic research, at least, is focused on sort of what are some proactive measures to try to make phishing impossible, and technical measures for that. Web browser mechanisms for detecting fake sites, multi-factor authentication, all of this sort of thing. But what's actually going on now, today, even as we speak, is these reactive measures where banks get lists of phishing URLs that have been reported, and then they add them to a blacklist, which get disseminated out through the anti-phishing toolbars, and then the banks go after the hosting site. They send takedown requests to the ISP, which hosts it, and also if it's a registered domain, to the registrar. So we collected, in fact, we still are collecting phishing reports from several sources, but the one I'll be talking about today is from this group called PhishTank, which is an open group that if you go to phishtank.com, they encourage, it's very Web 2.0. They encourage people to come and submit phishing reports, and then and even more than that, they allow people to vote on whether or not you think this is a phishing site or not. You get enough positive votes, then it is. And so that's how they verify the authenticity of the submissions. So we pulled the URLs from PhishTank, and then we went out and contacted these phishing sites repeatedly, twice an hour, until they stopped responding. Because we wanted to get an estimate of how long the sites were alive. Okay. So before I get into the details of the data results, I want to talk about how about a completely different type of phishing attack, and this is called from the Rockfish gang. And they operate in a completely different manner to standard phishing attacks, and they're actually responsible for about half of all phishing, this one particular group. What they first do is they publish several innocuous-sounding domains, meaningless names, lofad.info. Doesn't look like a bank at all. Then they send out a phishing email with the URL that looks kind of like this. It'll give www.bankname. A unique identifier dot dot, and then finally the domain all the way to the right, because people will look at this and they know to look to the left and they see, oh, there's my bank name, it seems legit. Okay, and so people click on that link, and then this domain itself, they control a name server which resolves this to a number of IP addresses, which are compromised servers, botnets basically, which are only serve as proxies back to a central backend server, which actually hosts the phishing site itself. So you have the domain itself, which doesn't appear to have any phishing site on it. You have the compromised machines on the end users, which isn't hosting a phishing site. All it does is serve as a proxy back to the actual host. And even more than that, what they do is each domain hosts impersonates a number of banks, at the same time. Usually around 25 different banks are impersonated for each domain. Okay? So depending upon the structure of the right-hand side of the URL, that will determine which bank you go to. So it's, fairly sophisticated. It's a lot more resilient to failure because you have this dynamic pool of domains, which maps onto an equally dynamic pool of IP addresses. So as one of the IP, you contact the ISP, they remove the IP address, they clean it up, it automatically picks another one. And they have this constant pool of domains. They also increase the confusion because they're splitting the components of the attack over several different responsible authorities. You've got the registrar, like I said, who sees a domain, and then you've got the compromised machine owner, which not even hosting the site. And because they use this wildcard DNS, it completely confuses PhishTank and many of the phishing collators. They see 18,000 reports over 8 weeks, which is half of all of the reports, which just gets reduced down to only 400 unique domains. So what we traced over time is, this is over the period of 8 weeks. The red dots indicate how many unique Rockfish domains are alive on a given day, and the blue shows the number of IP addresses which appear to be operational and responsive. And the key thing here is that no matter what, it's always greater than 0. They always have some IPs operational. They always have domains operational. So you have the banks which are going after these domains, but by the time they get to them, there's already a new one operational. So they're making a lot of money, I believe. So then the next thing to look at was look at how many IP addresses are newly added each day versus how many get removed. And as you can see, there's a very strong correlation here, which this implies that there's automated replenishment. As an IP address gets cleaned up, another one automatically takes its place. It's a lot less coordinated when you look at the domains which are added each day. It's actually quite unsynchronized, which suggests that they actually manually replenish domains as they're removed. And also this here shows the number of domains versus number of IPs which are removed in a given day. And this is completely uncoordinated, which suggests that the response of the registrar and removing the domain and the response of the ISP is independent. They're not working together in any way that we can see. So let me go back to the data analysis of how long the sites stick around for. If you look at standard ordinary phishing sites, they last for an average of 60 hours with a median of around 20. But when you look at the Rockfish, they stick around for a lot longer, over a day longer on average, and a day and a half longer for the median. So they're being a lot more effective because their strategy isn't all that well understood by the people who are responsible for defending it. So the averages and medians are very misleading here. This is a histogram of the site lifetimes and number of days, and as you can see, it has a very heavy tail, or no, a very long tail. So what you have is a lot of the sites get removed very quickly, but some of them just slip through the cracks and stick around for longer and longer and longer. We see